Hello, hello, everyone. It is lovely to have you all joining us. We're going to give attendees a moment to log on, but while we wait, Jordan, Jake, Nicole, it is always lovely to see you. And we're going to do a little icebreaker. So, Jake, are you planning any trips or staycations anytime soon?
Absolutely no trips. I've got a 1.5-year-old, can't really go anywhere. So we're staying in for the foreseeable future and just hanging out with him.
Well, that sounds lovely and probably the safest bet right now. What about you, Jordan? You have anything
I just first gotta say it blows my mind, Jake, that Logan is a year and a half old, because it feels like it was just a month ago that he was born. So.
I was rounding up. He's 16 months.
Yeah, it's pretty close though. It's still
Yeah.
wild because I remember that, but that's insane. No, I'm thinking of what I have coming up. I'm actually flying out to Pittsburgh in the start of November to go to a Pittsburgh Steelers game. I'm a huge Steelers fan, so a friend of mine is getting married. He lives out in Detroit, and so we are meeting in Pittsburgh to watch a game as a engagement present from me to him. So pretty excited for that.
fun? What about you, Nicole? Any big plans?
Yeah, it's so in October, I guess we've got a long weekend coming up. So my wife and I are gonna stash the 4-year-old with the grandparents, and we are gonna go wine tasting in Madera County in California. So looking
Nice.
forward to that, a weekend away.
Wow, I'm a little jealous of some of those things.
Wine
Well,
tasting out here is such a good weekend getaway, and I think everybody
Oh,
forgets
yeah.
about it because it's so easy to do too.
It's so easy. I mean, the challenge is finding kind of the spots that, everybody else hasn't found. So that's kind of what I like doing.
Nice.
Well, it should be a good time. Well, we're going to go ahead and get started. Today's event is hosted by the team at Modern Sales Pros. For those of you not familiar, Modern Sales Pros is the world's largest revenue leadership community for those in sales management, sales and revenue operations, sales development, and the related supporting disciplines. Our mission is to create an environment for our 20K and growing members to answer questions that they would normally struggle to solve on their own and help them see around corners. We do that through great live sessions like what you're about to experience, through our robust online forum, and in the near future, our fingers are crossed, in-person events. For those of you who aren't members, you'll be invited to join afterwards, and we really hope you will. It's a great community. Now, if you like this content, you will definitely be interested in our upcoming Revenue Excellence Summit happening on October 12th through the 14th, where we will talk about the people, processes, and technology needed to help you get ready for 2022. I'm going to go ahead and drop that in the chat for you all to register today. We hope to see you there. But enough about MSP. Today's session would not be possible without the sponsorship from the amazing team at Ring DNA. Now I'm going to hand it off to Jake Spear to say a few words about Ring DNA. Jake.
Thank you, Elizabeth. In short, really, Ring DNA is actually about having amazing, personal, fruitful conversations. And what that means to us is a whole suite of sales engagement tools that tell you everything from how to and who are the right people to reach out to at the right time, to how do I get context both before and during my interactions with my prospects, all the way to how do I learn from those experiences? How do I get better? How do I use data to understand how I increase my conversions in the future?
All right, great. Well, thank you so much, Jake and Ring DNA. So today we are going to be talking about your ultimate RevOps dashboard. And we have some great experts in the field here to talk through the content, Jordan and Jake, and we have our fabulous moderator, Nicole. Now, before we get started, I would love for you all to introduce yourselves. So Jordan, starting with you, tell us all about yourself.
Yeah, cool. Super excited to be here. I think everybody at MSP is probably familiar with me. I've been around a little bit, so good to see everybody again. I'm the director of revenue operations at Ring DNA, which for us is a very important role. So I oversee the alignment between our sales, customer success, marketing teams, also some finance and legal work, and am very actively involved in all of those teams, working with Jake, the sales leaders, the marketing leaders, the CS leaders to figure out how we can get better, implement strategies, and keep moving forward all the time.
Great. Always great to have you here, Jordan. Jake, can you introduce yourself?
Yeah, nice to meet everyone. My name is Jake Spear. I run the SMB and commercial sales teams at Ring DNA. My background actually is part of the reason why this session is so important to me. My background is actually in sales ops. So prior to Jordan joining, I was actually running sales operations at Ring DNA. And when we needed someone to run the actual frontline teams, I joined that team as well. So a lot of what Jordan is so helpful on the team today was stuff that I got the benefit of being a part of sort of in the early stages of the company.
Well, it's great.
Jake and I were on the ops team together for all of about 4 weeks, I think, before they said Jake's got to move over to manage the SMB commercial sales team for probably a couple months, and then he never came back. So,
oops.
Well, it is great to have you here as well, Jake, and our moderator, Nicole, if you could introduce yourself.
Yeah, thanks, Elizabeth. So my name is Nicole Choksi. I run marketing here at Atrium. And my background, I've had the good fortune of running marketing in a variety of different small and medium-sized startups at various stages. And a common thread has always been aligning with sales. So I'm really excited to moderate this discussion. Looking forward to the wisdom that Jake and Jordan will be dropping here.
All right, great. Well, it's so great to have you all here. We're really excited to dive in, but first we're going to go over some housekeeping notes. First, and I already saw this question come through. Yes, we are recording this event and we will be providing the link to that recording along with the key takeaways. So I'll be emailing you all later. You'll be able to access this recording on the previous events page of our website as well. Second, if you have questions for our panelists, which I'm sure you will, please be sure to use the Q&A function and we'll be sure to get to them throughout the event. So as I said before, today we are going to be covering your ultimate RevOps dashboard and taking a deep dive into the following. What metrics do you need in your RevOps dashboard? Tools you need to simplify gathering the data to measure those metrics. Insights and actions to look for in your RevOps metrics, and using your RevOps dashboard to influence sales. So Jordan, we're going to kick it off with you. What metrics do you need in your RevOps dashboard? It's
such a loaded question. That is such a big question, but I'll take a crack at it. I mean, I think the thing I would caveat this entire answer with is that this is going to vary business to business, right? Like when I speak about what metrics we use and what we're doing, it's often very tech specific, and there's a lot of people here that might not be in tech, and you have different businesses, different funnels, different operations, and so this is very much business to business. So my idea here is to sort of provide more of a framework. I mean, obviously I'm gonna give you some examples, but more of a framework of how to approach coming up with what the metrics you should track for your business are. And the way I would think of it, the metrics that I would go to identify is diagnostic metrics. For me, that's the most important thing. And I'm not talking about like pipeline as a whole, right? Like how much pipeline I generate. That to me is not a helpful metric. That's too broad. Like if I'm not generating enough pipeline, there could be 73 things wrong, and that doesn't help me identify what those things are in any way, shape, or form. It has no amount of like narrowing what that problem is. So I want metrics that are actually going to help me like identify that there's a problem. Also, at least like target me towards where that problem might be in my revenue operation, which can be anywhere from marketing to sales to customer success, right? That's a really big pipeline. And the way I would identify those metrics is that I actually sort of work through my entire funnel from ad clicks all the way down to NPS scores with my current customers, right? Because when you talk about revenue operation, it literally starts at the ads you're running on LinkedIn all the way down to your churn rate. Like that, at the end of the day, that's your revenue operation, and work for each stage of that. So ad clicks, leads to MQLs, MQLs to SALs, SALs to SQLs, all the way down through churn rate. And for each of those sort of like stages, what are the 1 to 2 metrics that you want to track? And maybe it's as simple as like lead to MQL conversion rate as a metric, right? Track all of those things. And what that's going to do is going to give you something that you can hone in on. Like if lead to MQL rate, or let's say speed to lead is bad, right? I can go into speed to lead and say, here's the 6 things that could make speed to lead bad. So now I know what I need to fix rather than just like, hey, leads aren't converting. So it's more of like a per funnel approach to this, but really I would think of it as break down your whole funnel into simply targetable steps. By the way, like MQL is a terrible metric to set targets for. Super helpful to identify where you have a problem in your funnel. Like that's what MQL should actually be used for. Break it all down like that, then identify the 1 to 2 at each of those stages. Is going to help you identify whether or not that piece of your revenue operation is healthy. And that's what you should be looking at and getting used to looking at on a daily basis. Which is a really long answer of saying it depends, by the way, but hopefully a bit of a framework. And these are a lot of the things that we use here and we change them all the time because we decide, hey, that metric's no longer helpful in identifying what's wrong here. Let's plug something else in that's going to help us.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a really good way to look at it. Jake, I was wondering if you might just kind of throw a light from a practical standpoint of kind of as a commercial sales leader, how do you think about, Jordan was talking about some of the leading indicator metrics you need to measure. How do you think about some of those metrics as you're managing your team on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think one of the things I think we fail to do a lot of the times is from a management side, we end up running the metrics that we believe are important. And then we push them in front of the sales reps and just say, hey guys, this is what's wrong. And to Jordan's point, it's usually like we say things like, you're not doing enough calls. You don't have enough pipeline. You're not sending enough emails. You're not doing enough of this. And when I think about it from when I put myself in the rep's shoes, and if I were to hear that message from my sales management team, from my RevOps team, I think my mind would just go straight to, okay, so what? Like, what is that? What is that? That's not helpful to me. As a rep, I'm looking for guidance. I'm looking for coaching on how to get better. But telling me that, there is a problem isn't telling me, isn't teaching me, isn't keeping me engaged in my own success. If I have a leader who's saying, hey, I'm sort of working to diagnose the problem. I'm running some of these indicators that Jordan was just mentioning, and we've sort of pinpointed, we've narrowed it down to, it's probably one of these things. Let's dig into that process. Can you imagine the kind of one-on-one or coaching you're going to have with that rep? Right. And that's sort of how I think about it, is when I work with Jordan on the dashboards running for a team, I always put myself in my rep's shoes of how are they going to respond to this? Is it going to be helpful to them, or are they just going to look at me and go, okay, I know I need to sell more. I want a bigger commission check anyway. Of course they want to sell more. Yeah.
And it also, it helps too when I think about it. It's never one thing. This is a very important thing to note, right? Like if I say speed to lead is bad, if I look at my speed to lead as a whole, I'm like, hey, that's bad. It's not just one thing. It's never going to be just one, like, oh, I make this one adjustment and speed to lead is fixed. Like that's just not the case. There's like 7 things that could be wrong. I probably need to tweak all of those things or half of those things. And it's very important. Some of those, like, let's use speed to lead as an example, could be bad lead quality, could be poor training, it could be bad technology, not allowing us to route the leads fast enough to actually call them on time, could be poor data, right? Like there's lots of things that could be causing that problem. I also think it's very important for the sales reps to hear, hey, here's the 3 other things we've fixed. One of them was poor lead quality. One of them is additional data. We've got this new technology. And also we're going to train you and enable you to do this better, right? Like you need to improve, but also we improved all these other pieces, which is, it shows reps that it's not just, hey, you need to do better. It's the business as a whole is improving and growing and scaling. And you're a huge important part of that, obviously, right?
And Jordan, that kind of reminds me of something that we looked at a long time ago with Ring DNA, which you mentioned, speed to lead. And being able to attack some of these problems from multiple angles, I think is hugely important. I know, a bunch of years ago when we were looking at our metrics, we saw speed to lead wasn't up to sort of our standards. We looked at everything from how quickly was our rep responding, but also how quickly was that lead being assigned,
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
And
Yeah.
it could have been, it could have been either problem. It could have been additional
It
problems.
was,
But
and it was probably both.
it was
Right.
probably
Like if
both.
it was
Yeah.
probably
Right.
both. Like that typically it is many things. Like that's
Right. So totally. I love that your sort of your comments on that is don't, even if you've identified one problem, look for all the angles in which that problem could be generating from.
right. And I think that's the important thing when I'm thinking about what metrics to use in the RevOps dashboard is I want to identify like areas of improvement that let me hone in on 6 or 7 potential, smaller problems that could be causing that fire. So if I think of like MQL to opportunity rate or MQL to SQL rate, right? Like there's a lot of things that could be impacting that. Like maybe our targeting is bad on the marketing side. Maybe our pickup rate by sales reps is bad and we're not like reaching out to them promptly enough. Maybe our emails aren't sending. Maybe we are not doing discovery or qualification as well as we should be. Maybe we have a bad SQO definition. Like all of these things are possible and it's probably some combination thereof. But that metric, the MQL to SQL metric, lets me see that specific piece of our funnel is broken. And here's the 7 things underneath there that might be causing that I should hone in on as a RevOps team with my sales manager, with my marketing manager, with the entire team.
So I think that's great, but I'm sure folks are thinking, how do you actually gather all that data into a single place, right? Like what kind of tools, how easy is it to actually put all this stuff in a single place so that you can actually have this, holistic view of what could be causing issues in your funnel?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And it's not easy. Like, let's be honest. There's sort of 2 pieces. Well, 2 pieces to that in my mind. And then one of them, we'll dive into gathering the data, but aligning your data is very important, right? Like that's sort of the foundation of an entire revenue operation, or your business as a whole. Aligning definitions, by the way, equally as important. Like even if I have a ton of data, but marketing thinks an SAL is one thing and sales thinks it's another thing, and the CEO thinks it's a third thing, like none of this data actually matters then because we're all speaking different languages and we're not going to action it well, which is going to hinder my business, right? So those 2 things are super important. Touching on the data one, because definitions is easy. Go to your executives and say, hey, like what are these definitions? Let's set them. Like let's just agree on what they are, right? The data piece is a little more difficult. For me, it's sort of 2 things: data gathering and data hygiene. Number one thing on the data gathering side is first pick a system of record. For us, it's Salesforce. I think for a lot of people, it should be Salesforce. It's a really great system of record. It's very powerful. You can do a lot of things. And then make sure all of the data is flowing into that system of record in a usable way, whether it's using tools that exist within that ecosystem specifically, which is one of the reasons that I'm a huge advocate for Salesforce. They have tons of tools that work inside of Salesforce or built in it, and therefore the data is very, very usable, or using tools that have real-time integrations. I think that's super, super important. Then the sort of second half is data hygiene. I'm a huge advocate of Cloud Dingo. If you're getting a bunch of messy data, you need to keep it clean or it is going to be also useless. Like if you have duplicate data in a messy CRM, that will ruin everything. You'll never know what's broken. So again, like Cloud Dingo, by the way, super cheap, awesome platform that helps you clean up your system. I don't work for Cloud Dingo, but just recommending it for anybody watching because it's really cool. But super helpful in data hygiene.
Yeah, Jordan, as I think about sort of the other side, the sales piece, of course, we want to get sort of everything into that system of record sort of seamlessly, smoothly. But I think one thing that we do oftentimes as sales leaders is if the data doesn't get into Salesforce, we place the blame on the reps. And I don't think that's necessarily the correct way to do it. Usually if they are not inputting their activities, the things that are happening to them, it's likely because we haven't set up the system to work in their favor. I want my team spending their time on the phone, on Zoom, talking with people and having actual conversations. I really don't want them spending time thinking about, hey, did I log this email to Salesforce earlier?
Right.
Did I put my notes in? That's not the best use of their time.
I also don't want you as the sales manager, like pinging reps. Hey, like, could you put these emails in Salesforce? Like that's
totally. So one of the things that I know that I work on with Jordan and some of our other leadership team here is when we identify that certain metrics that we want to track aren't getting into Salesforce. I oftentimes I'll do a ride along with my reps. Show me how you do X. And when I see sort of the places where it breaks down, my first thought isn't just, hey, rep, get to work, put this in Salesforce. It's, hey, Jordan, how do we make this automated for them? How do we use the tools within Salesforce? How do we use the tools that we currently have, our own product, and make it so that the rep actually isn't thinking about their own data cleanliness and hygiene, that they are just doing their job, which is selling.
There's a really important thing for every person on this call that's a sales manager or RevOps manager. It's a very important thing with that conversation when Jake comes to me and says, hey, like, what can we do to get this data in Salesforce? Because we have this conversation not infrequently. Like it's actually quite frequent, right? Oh, you have to ask the why. Do your RevOps discovery in this scenario. And there's a reason why. It's because Jake will come to me and say something like, hey, like, how can we automate employee count into Salesforce? I need to know why, because I want to know what he wants to see from that data to understand how I need to track it and automate it at what point in the process it needs to exist. Therefore, that data is super, super usable against all the other data in our system, because this is, again, our system of record. So it's not just throw the data in, it's put the data in a very usable and non-duplicative and accurate way so that you can use it with everything else in your CRM, right? And asking the why is very important for figuring out how to do that, because maybe Jake wants it before the lead is assigned so that he can route leads based on that, or maybe we want to route leads based on that. Great. That's a whole different thing than if we just want it when an opportunity is created, right? And so the why, and having a conversation of not just Jake says, hey, can we add employee count? And me be like, hey, it's added. Like that's not the conversation. Right. It's a little more in depth than that. And as much as this probably annoys Jake and Ryan, our sales leaders, when I'm like, oh, can we set up 20 minutes to talk about this? Like every single time, it's super, super important.
Right. to that point, Jordan, actually, it's so helpful that Jordan does it, as annoying as it may be, because when Jordan does that, it actually ends up, we come up with other things we could use those data points for, right? He asks us the why, we start thinking through it. And just like discovery in a sales process, all of a sudden I'm going, oh, you know what? I could use that data point for X when I thought I could only use it for Y. So it's really important to have that sort of relationship with your RevOps team coming from the sales leadership side, that you want them questioning you. You want them in finding out why you want what you want. You actually don't want them to just be order takers and fulfilling your requests. So I totally appreciate it, Jordan. Even if I give you grief about it.
Yeah, and it's important. I mean, I totally appreciate that point, right? Like in terms of just starting and working backwards, right? Begin with the end in mind here. And both of you have mentioned kind of start with the why and talk about how you're going to use the data. So I'm wondering if we could just kind of talk a little bit about some specific examples of kind of insights that you're looking to take away from the data so that you can improve on a process or coach a rep better, or some specific actions that you can take. And I'm wondering, Jordan, if you want to just kick it off, just kind of talking about it more from an operations process standpoint. And then Jake, you can kind of talk about it more from a sales action standpoint.
Yeah. So I think the question is around like, what insights or actions would I take looking at the metrics we're talking about? Got it.
Exactly.
Yeah. So it's a great question. It's very broad. Obviously, we've talked about a lot of funnel metrics. But I would approach, if I'm looking at that dashboard, right, and I have 20 components, they're all reflective or indicative of different pieces of my revenue operation. And I find something that's broken, and let's use speed to lead because it's sort of like an easy one for people to understand. And it's the easy example because it's super powerful. If anybody doesn't know, speed to lead is like the most important thing in revenue operations. If you call somebody in the first 5 minutes or 30 minutes later after they convert, your likelihood of converting them ever to an opportunity is like 20 times higher if you call in the first 5 minutes. It's insanely important. But the first thing I would do if I go in as an ops person and I see, hey, my speed to lead on pricing requests is like 45 minutes. Like, oh my God, that's broken. What am I going to do? Like, Jesus Christ. Jake is over there like, pricing leads are terrible. Like, we can't do anything, right? Like, we're not getting any marketing. Marketing is like, sales isn't converting. CS is annoyed because they're not getting new customers. The whole revenue operation is upset and my life is ruined. So this is important. But the first thing I would do is actually, I wouldn't talk to sales, marketing, or CS about it. And this is going to sound counterintuitive, but the first and foremost thing that you should do in the ops world is, if speed to lead is broken, do I have my foundation for that specific metric? And what I mean by that is, do I have the tools in place and processes and the trainings and those sort of things to actually power this in real time? And so I would go in and check, like, Somebody converts on my website and I would go test it. I would go sign up for a pricing form. How long till they're in Salesforce, right? Is that 5 minutes? Is that 20 minutes? Do I have data being, pushed in there causing delays that are forcing this? Like, what is the infrastructure actually in place for that lead to get from conversion to a rep in 5 minutes? Like, do we have the capability to do that? And if the answer is no, that's the first thing you fix without ever, like, you tell everybody, hey, we're fixing this problem, but there's nothing for sales and marketing to do here other than let operations go fix the problem. Now, assuming you get through that and you have lean data, HubSpot, Salesforce, and RingDNA, and so the rep, all of the operational pieces is awesome, right? Lead converts 2 minutes later, it's in the rep's dialer with a big red notification that says call them. There's no excuse why this wouldn't be happening from an operational standpoint. Then you slide into the okay, what have we done wrong? Why isn't this working, right? And I would go look at different things. I would first, ask the sales reps, do you know that you're supposed to call these people right away, right? Like, have we done the training and actual process stuff to show sales reps that they need to do this? Do we have expectations set that they're going to call these people within 5 minutes? And if so, why aren't they doing it? Maybe the leads are terrible. Maybe the leads aren't getting enough data. We're not enriching fast enough, or we're not requesting phone numbers anymore, so we can't call them. Maybe reps just don't know how to do this. Maybe we haven't trained on it entirely, right? Like, there's a whole lot, and it's probably, again, all of the above. Like, this is the scenario where we'd be like, hey, sales, or hey, marketing, like, let's get some better leads in place because they're not calling these because they're bad. Also, we're going to retrain them on doing this, and I'm going to set a 5-minute expectation, and we're going to track it for the next forever. And anybody shy of it is going to get a talking to from Jake, hopefully. Right. So, but I would, before I'd slide into all of those things, it would be the foundational things, and then sort of the actual team focus trainings, tweaks, and implementations.
Right. And so, Jake, from a team focused standpoint and a rep focused standpoint, can you give a few examples of how you would use some of these insights and actions to kind of drive better performance?
Yeah, actually, one came to mind because it's something we worked on somewhat recently. And that is, there's every rep after their first meeting with the prospect, their sort of discovery meeting, they'll send an email. And in most organizations, that email sounds something like, thanks for meeting with me today. I learned X. I'm looking forward to talking to you again. And to us, that actually, that email is much more critical than I think a lot of orgs feel or think, or even reps think. So we've actually run a lot of trainings on how to make that email really stand out, how to make your prospect really feel heard. And what we realized was, well, how do we actually inform ourselves on when those are going either the way that we want or not going the way that we want. And so we actually, myself and Ryan, the other sales leader here, we worked with Jordan and his team. How do we track those specific emails, right? We're doing a ton of tracking on emails, open rates, reply rates, all that kind of stuff we do on a regular basis. But how do we narrow down to that exact email, the one that gets sent right after that first meeting? And then how do we track to make sure it got sent out at the right time? How do we track to make sure that the right language is in there, mm-hmm. and that they're actually having that coaching is actually working? And so we ended up standardizing sort of the subject lines of those emails across the team, right? Telling our reps, your emails have to go out within X amount of hours from your prospect, from your actual call. And it needs to include one of the following words, right? And as long as it includes that word, and for us, it's challenge. It's called a challenge email. As long as it includes challenge, or then Jordan can help us track those in Salesforce. We can see the time of when they had that first meeting, right, via phone or Zoom, and we do that with our own tool, RingDNA. So we're seeing the time of the meeting. We're seeing the time of when that email went out. We can go in, make sure it's within that SLA, and then I can read that email. And I can then give timely, specific, relevant feedback to my team of, hey, we're tracking this because of how critical it is. Let's talk about what you sent out. And it's fresh in their minds because they just did it.
Right. So let's kind of tie it back to sales. Like, how does this actually ultimately, how have you guys observed it driving additional bookings, additional sales and revenue for the company. Just trying to understand for folks out there, when it comes to using this dashboard and these insights, how should they be thinking about the impact that it'll ultimately have on their org?
Jordan, you want me to start?
You go for it. Yeah, this feels like a Jake question.
Yeah.
This kind of actually, I think, loops back a little bit to one of the early points we made, and that is, if you're hiring the right reps, they're going to be hungry for coaching. They're going to be hungry for how do they get better, how do they make more money, whatever the reason is. I don't really care, right? I just want them to want to get better. And oftentimes reps, they are looking to the leaders, they're looking to the RevOps team to help inform them of where they maybe need help, right? They don't necessarily know or want to be the ones, and I shouldn't expect them to be the ones to come to me and say, I need help in X, Y, or Z area. In fact, I think the better experience for reps is when I can come to them and say, hey, this is all the data I'm running. This is what I'm seeing on your calls. This is what I'm seeing in your activity. I'm pinpointing a couple areas where we can improve on, and they can tell me I'm, full of crap if they want. But I'm coming to them with data that's helpful to them. And I haven't had an experience yet with reps where when I actually show up with real data that, they throw it back in my face. It's terrible when you walk in and say, I feel like this is the case that's happening.
Yeah. Anecdotally,
I think this is what you're doing wrong. They're going to tell you to shove it. And sorry, Nicole, I think you were.
But no, so I think that's a good point. I just wanted to drill in on kind of what you were saying around like the reps throwing the data back in your face, right? And I'm just wondering, have you thought about like how industry benchmarks, right, or using kind of third-party data as another kind of way to say like, okay, this is another third-party authority that kind of says this is the range within which a particular metric needs to be. And I'm just kind of wondering, and this is actually one of the questions that one of our attendees is also wondering is, how do you think about, leveraging industry benchmarks when it comes to using these insights?
It's a great question. I think industry benchmarks are great absent any accurate internal data of your own. Like, I think that's typically sure, everybody's been guilty of going and being like, well, like everybody says my meetings booked rate should be, XYZ percentage.
Right.
Like it's industry benchmarks. If you have no other internal data, sure, super helpful. You should use them because it's better than not using any data, right? Like it gives you a target to shoot for. But if you have any internal data that's accurate, it's of course way more important than the industry benchmarks, because industry benchmarks vary still pretty drastically. Like we call tech, like broadly speaking, tech is an industry. Tech companies vary so much, like place to place, pricing to pricing, product to product, like it's insane. And so industry benchmarks, not always something that I would use, and I typically try to avoid them, to be honest, at all costs.
Okay.
Jake, did you have anything? Sorry, that was a really strong. I realized that I came across very strong against industry benchmarks, but I feel pretty strongly against them. So
I think you're right. I mean, I mentioned before sort of what we consider here as sort of the three keys of great feedback is it's got to be timely, it's got to be relevant, it's got to be specific. If I'm using industry benchmarks to give feedback to one of my reps, again, in the absence of our own internal data, that's about as relevant as I can be.
Yeah.
If I have real data from within the organization, that's that much better, right? Then I can't have a rep saying, well, that person's doing this instead on our team and they're achieving a different result. So I'm totally aligned with you, Jordan. Industry benchmarks in the absence of personal data.
Totally. Yeah. If you think of it like as a more firm example of what Jake's saying, because I would think of this as a fellow, right? The experience of if Jake came to me and said, hey, your stage 4 to close rate is 40%. Industry standard is 70% per XYZ source, right? I could be like, yeah, but like I'm just gonna write that off. That means nothing to me because my process, our company, our business, entirely different than anybody else. It's really easy for me to do that in my mind and just get this, like, whatever, Jake, like, thanks for showing me that. I'm moving back to my sales process, right? But if Jake comes to me and says, hey, you're at 40% from this stat, everybody else at the company is at 65%. Here's what they're doing differently, and here's what you need to be doing differently. And I'm going to work with you and coach you on this because, and by the way, we have all these metrics. Like I looked at these 5 reps and this is way higher than yours. Here's what they're doing different. I can't write that off. That's super important feedback, and it's going to help me make a
Right.
lot more money, right? Like I know that to be true. That's a great example of coaching. So it's just a totally different thing, and that's exactly why I would stay away from them if I can.
Right. Well, we actually have a question coming into our Q&A. It's coming from Chris Pedersen. Do you spiff or drive commission on the types of metrics that you recommend using? So it doesn't sound like a micromanagement thing, but a what's in it for me thing. And then his other question is, how do you recommend aligning that spiff or commission with metrics in the best way?
So no, I have like, I don't. I mean, I've spiffed and commissioned on things like multi-year deals and like things that are really good generally for the business, right? I've never spiffed on specific pieces of my revenue operation metrics. And the reason for that is all of my revenue operations metrics should already be oriented on helping the reps make more money, because they're oriented around helping the company make more money. And if the company making more money doesn't equate to your reps making a bunch more money, then your commission plan is flawed, and you should revisit that probably before you even like, hey, like let's just put in a short-term spiff. I'm actually not a huge fan of spiffs. I think they're can be sort of demotivating for short periods of time, and so I typically don't do them. So I have no real answer to the second half of the question, I guess, than that. But that would be. I think as long as the metrics are aligned around helping the company make more money, they're also going to help the reps make more money, help the sales managers coach them to be better sales reps, and therefore it's already good for them, and they should be vested in helping it.
Yeah,
So
I think Jordan. Oh, go ahead, Nipple.
No, go ahead.
I think if you're wondering whether you should spiff a certain activity or a certain metric, it probably, to Jordan's point, should actually just be built into the comp plan, because you don't want that to be a short-term boost of what your team is doing, right? Because that's exactly what will happen to the spiff. The team will do that activity or that action that you're asking them to do for the time of that spiff. And then that action is going to drop no matter what. So you got to be really careful with what you're asking them to do, right? Because your reps will do literally exactly whatever it is that brings them that money, even if it's not necessarily in the spirit of why you put it in place. But if it's that important of an action, build that into the commission structure. That should just be something that they always have access to.
Yeah, and I think one of the points behind the question also, and I've seen this as well, just kind of working with various sales teams, is as you're looking to measure and drive behaviors on leading indicator metrics, sometimes that connection between that leading indicator metric to the ultimate like booking that the rep gets comped on isn't exactly clear. And I think part of the question here is like, how do you explain the what's in it for me? Like when you say like, oh, okay, you need to actually set more first meetings in order for you to actually, close more deals and so on and so forth, right?
Yeah, I mean, which I think you use the same internal data to sort of like walk through that process, right? Like I do this a lot with the team. By the way, RevOps should get very involved with your sales and marketing team. None of what we're saying is like, hey, I send it to Jake and then Jake takes it to sales reps. Like I present and do trainings for the sales team all the time. And if I'm ever like asking the sales team to do something, I will always be like, here's the why behind it. Here's the data I'm looking at. And here's why it's going to help you close an extra $100,000 this year, which means money in pockets for everybody sitting here, right? Like tie it to that, because closed bookings is a great motivator, and everything that you should be doing, everything in your funnel when we're talking about all these metrics should be tied to more closed bookings. So it helps everybody, and you should be able to walk through that. If you can't, you might be doing the wrong thing. This is a very important point. If you're having a hard time connecting this to like more closed deals, maybe it's not the thing you should be pushing for.
Right. Exactly. I mean, like the connection has to be continually, like it has to be overt, and you have to continually kind of reinforce that, right? Just operationally speaking from a sales standpoint. Awesome. So those are kind of the questions. I know we're kind of running up on the end of our time here as well. Do we want to cover kind of the key takeaways, Elizabeth?
Yeah, that would be great if I could just get a tweet length key takeaway from
So we have to sum this up at 240 characters or less is what you're telling us.
That's right.
Is it 240? Did they raise it? Is it smaller?
No, it's 280 actually. 140 times
280.
2. Yeah.
I am a verbose human being. This is a big challenge. Jake, you go first. I got to think about this.
I was literally about to say the same thing back to you, is that I'm thinking about it too. How to distill it down into a couple sentences here.
Well, we can make it like a tweet storm. Let's talk about a tweet storm, right? So you can have like 3 or 4 tweets. Go for it.
Okay, so I'll start, Jordan, to help you out, but I guess I'm thinking of this sort of stream of consciousness and not necessarily in tweet form, but I'm thinking about the couple things that I feel like we really, Jordan and I feel strongly about that we talked about today. The sort of the first and foremost is, as you are thinking about what metrics to track, make sure those metrics are ones that actually inform you of the direction of the problem. Don't just provide metrics to your team of there is a problem. You need to show them the direction. You need to show them the diagnosis, right? And how you got to that. And sort of on the sales side, it's that's what's going to resonate. They're not going to resonate with the things that are vague. They're not going to resonate with being told get better, right? They're going to resonate with being told, here's how you get better. I've identified X, we can work on Y. So I think that was sort of the first point. Second point we came to is the way that you provide these metrics is you keep your CRM clean. You got to have one single point of truth. Having it in multiple places is a no-no. Get it into one spot. Make sure that your reps are given the tools and ability to get that data in without breaking a sweat, right? We don't want them focused on, that's not their job, is not to put data in. Their job is to sell. And then use tools like that on the back end to make sure that stays clean. Again, so your reps are not tripping over data while they're running through stuff, calling people who haven't worked at a company in 10 years, calling a duplicate, right? And having it logged to the wrong record. So, and I know I'm not putting this in tweet form. So maybe someone more marketing heavy than me.
No, that was a really good walkthrough. I think the only thing I would tack on to the sort of tail end of that, which I think is very important, is to remain agile. All of this is very, very important, right? But when I think about, hey, I got to pick 20 metrics to put in a dashboard that I'm going to use to identify where there's gaps or holes or breaks in my revenue operation, that's a very big lift, obviously, right? That is looking at my entire company from a revenue standpoint. There's going to be things that I think on day one are super important that 6 months from now, I'm be like, you know what, this isn't driving the right behavior, or you know what, this is just not a thing I even care to look at. It doesn't matter one way or the other. There's absolutely going to be those things. And so stay agile, plug and replace these components. If you're finding that things that you're tracking or looking at are driving the wrong behaviors, or demotivating for reps, demotivating for marketing, or they're just not something that is ever going to break for you because you haven't seen it break in 6 months, look at something else. Pull other metrics in, change as your business model changes, as you get new ICPs, new sales reps, bigger teams. All these things are going to change what you're doing. And so it's very, very important with your data and your reporting to stay agile.
I got one more thing to add on there, Jordan. Be open to being wrong.
Totally.
I love when a rep comes and tells me something's broken, even if it's something that I and Jordan spent a ton of time on trying to make sure it gets logged appropriately and we're measuring it. If it's not working for the team, and they come to me and tell me that, I love that. I want to know.
Totally.
I want to know quickly. I want to know exactly what's wrong. And if I'm too proud to admit that the work that Jordan and I did might be wrong, then it's never going to get better. So be open to being wrong. Be open to changing these on a regular basis. I think I saw in the Q&A, someone asked about the cadence feedback loop between sort of RevOps, Jordan's team, and my team in sales. It's hard to even say it's weekly. It's almost daily, right? Jordan and I are constantly talking about these things. It's I guess structured more in a weekly format, but I bring things to Jordan as they come up, right?
Yeah.
As I think of things, as Jordan thinks of things. The minute that we decide, hey, this is a metric worth tracking, don't wait until your next scheduled meeting. Start planning for that immediately.
Totally. and yeah, weekly is too long. Like we have a regular weekly cadence, of course, but most of the thing, like never should you say like, oh, I'll wait to bring that up on Thursday. Like, no, if it's broken on Monday, fix it on Monday, right? Like take it to your team, have that conversation as soon as possible, because 3 days is a long time. It's a really, really long time. And so like the weekly cadence, obviously very important to check in on things, especially larger projects and that sort of stuff. But if you see something like, hey, this is bad, I want Jake, I want the sales rep, I want him to ping me the moment they realize that that's happening, so that we can immediately start looking into how to fix it.
All right. Well, this has been amazing. We are going to wrap things up, but first we want to thank everyone for attending today. We always love having our MSP audience here with us. Thank you also to our wonderful sponsor, RingDNA. You guys are fantastic. They're doing really great things, so be sure and check them out. Thank you also to Jordan and Jake. It's always great having you guys here to talk about your insights. I think the community gets a lot out of it. And Nicole, thank you for moderating. It's always a pleasure. The recordings and key takeaways will be available for everyone who attended. I'll be sending those out later so that you all can rewatch and get your questions fully answered. But in the meantime, don't forget to check out our upcoming events. We'll be excited to see you at the next one, and stay safe. Bye, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks all.